You please sign in, then we can start.
So do you use for redundancy for the name?
We just use Excel.
No, because I think I was
Yeah, that's fine. It's fine. You will never get repeated emails.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I think we're ready to start. Welcome everyone. This is the first instance of the DS3 paper reading group. My name is Aditya. You can call me Adi. I'm the president of DS3, and I'm very happy to welcome you all here. Let's get started. So what is DS3? DS3 is basically the Data Science and Statistics Society on the UTSC campus. We are a club that connects like-minded students with other peers who are interested in data science and machine learning and related fields. We provide opportunities for their development, be it professional or academic or anything else. Our mission is to create a platform of peer mentorship. So all our academic reps are your peers. They are third or fourth year students who have shown that they have the knowledge regarding the field and also would have volunteered to help you all foster a better academic profile. Apart from that, we also help in professional skills development by connecting you to industry partners and people who will be your connections for recruitment after you graduate or even through a co-op journey. We are not restricted to statistics or computer science in any way. We have people who have joined the club from all faculties and are interested in doing events with us. We'll soon be hosting a plethora of events in the winter, which are not only focused on math, but also explore other faculties like psychology or biology and their intersection with statistics. So some introduction to our executive team. We have Yvette, who's our VP of Operations. Then Rachel, who's our VP of Outreach. Vincent is our VP of Communications. Maliha is our VP of Campus Life. And Tan is our VP of Academics. Since this is a paper reading group event, most of these people have not made it here. But we are always there around campus. If you see us and want to give us any ideas, have any questions regarding the club, or even want to see something that DS3 does in the future, come and talk to us. We're always open to ideas and providing feedback. So what is a paper reading group? Yeah, one might ask. The paper reading group is a collection of, let's say, events or a series of events that we'll be holding starting today till the end of the next winter. We are going to be having academic reps and speakers who will be leading discussions and, as you can see, meet monthly to discuss a paper led by one of our academic reps and speakers. So we'll be meeting every month. One of the papers is going to be chosen by our academic reps or speakers. But if you have any suggestions, you can always go to our Discord server and start recommending papers. Anything, it does not even have to be read or led at this event. You could just meet up on Discord at any point of time and start discussing it. So I have made a special channel on our Discord server called the Paper Reading Group, and I'll share the recording and slides of today's event on there. So be active there and kind of get all the updates regarding this group there. The vision for starting this paper reading group was always to get some academic experience for all our undergraduate students. Since UofT is a research-focused university and UTSC being the co-op campus, a lot of undergraduate students miss out on the opportunity to get engaged in research. So this is our try to kind of enable you to start engaging with papers, start engaging with researchers on our campus who will kind of guide you through any area of your area of your choice. So let's say if you want to start researching in CS education, we'll kind of provide you the resources for it. We know that Professor Brian Harrington conducts a research group which is focused on CS education. You could always come to us and ask us about it, and we'll be happy to help you. Apart from that, these are all our social links. If you are not following us on Instagram or Discord, especially go and do that right now. The paper reading group, again, all the material will be posted on our GitHub. but the updates will be shared on Discord. So please do go and join the channel on Discord. I'm going to leave it here and till the time Anaki comes in and starts his presentation.
Yes. Is the audio good, everyone? Cool. Okay. Thank you so much to our president, Aditya, for that introduction and brief summary of what the paper reading group will look like, and also just a brief summary of what the club is. So yeah, I'll just get started. First, I want to tell you guys a little story about what happened to me basically every day, but like more specifically 2 weeks ago. Sorry, a month ago. So does anyone here watch American football by any chance? Oh, perfect. I love you guys. So as you guys know, a month ago, the NFL season just started. So on Instagram, I was just scrolling through, trying to find some videos about highlights of games. And I just searched up one thing. I'm a Pats fan personally. So I see someone shaking their head there. So I searched up some highlights for their game, and I just watched maybe 3 Instagram reels about it. And that's all. I closed my app and then just went about my day. Next thing I know is that more football videos come into my Instagram. And now my Explore page just filled with NFL highlights and NFL videos. And why is this the case? Well, this is because of the algorithm in Instagram and their use of AI, artificial intelligence, to curate my page based on my interests. So while my Instagram is filled with NFL, yours might be cooking or other sports or whatever it is you guys watch. So that's just a basic thing for AI that we all can relate to. But is something more serious is in the job hiring process, AI is used to filter out resumes. So for example, when you send in a job application, they might use an AI to basically not even consider you for that position if you don't have certain keywords in your resume. And even more seriously, AI and the way it's implemented can be unethical at times. For example, we all know how Facebook collect data from us from a couple of years ago, and now it's still a thing. So as you can see, AI, if not implemented properly, could lead to very unethical means of gathering data and its implementation in day-to-day life. So that's why today I will be talking about AI ethics. This way, yeah. So I will just be discussing a paper that introduces and explores the idea of what AI ethics is and how its implementation is lacking in real-world cases. So the paper is called From AI Ethics Principles to Data Science Practice, a Reflection and a Gap Analysis Based on Recent Frameworks and Practical Experience. The paper is written by 4 authors. Their names are shown up here. And oh, sorry, I forgot to introduce myself properly. My name is Anaki, and I am an academic rep for DS3. And well, today I'll be presenting this paper and the idea behind it. So before I start, I just wanted to tell you guys what the structure of this presentation is going to be. First, I'll give an overview of what I'll be presenting about. Then I'll give a proper definitions of the terminology that I'll be talking about throughout the presentation. Then I'll give some context and background of how the paper was written and explored. Then the methodology of how the researchers conducted their research on this paper. Then the results, and move on to conclusions after that. And once that's all wrapped up, I'll give a few critiques of the paper and what some areas that they're lacking in, and just references at the end. So let's start with some overview. The paper itself has 2 main aims. The first is to contribute to the translation of AI ethics to data science practice as part of the 3rd wave of AI ethics. You might be wondering what the 3rd wave is. I'll be going more into that in the definitions in the next few slides. But what this aim basically is stating is that it contributes to showing how you have an ethical theory and how you implement that into real life practices when you develop an AI. And the second aim of the paper is to widen the debate on AI governance. And this essentially states that you can determine who's responsible and accountable when creating AI. So if anything goes wrong, you know who to blame. Shouldn't say Facebook, but you guys know. So moving on to definitions. Does anyone here want to tell me what they think of when they think of artificial intelligence, AI? John.
Not one robot from Terminator, not one from the computer.
The Skynet from Terminator. So robot killing, human killing machines. That's an extreme example of what an AI is. But I like that example because then it shows like if we don't implement AI ethics properly, you know, who knows, Skynet might be real and Terminator, you know, it might just happen. Anyone else? Pedro.
There were three rules written by an author called Watson.
Yeah.
And then there was one other rule number 0 that was added by the other scholars years of artificial intelligence.
Cool. What's the author's name?
Asimov.
Asimov. Okay, we'll look into that after. And Christine.
All the program that takes in what it is inputted and then kind of changes itself to adapt to that information based on what program is meant.
I like that. That's a really technical answer, and it's really well along the lines of what the authors of the paper actually went with when they define AI. And well, according to the authors, the definition of AI is there are machine-based systems that rely on algorithms that perform human-like cognitive functions with varying levels of autonomy. So like Christine said, it's an algorithm-based machine that does what they're programmed to do and then learn from their mistakes and try to adapt and improve their functions. And the last part are varying levels of autonomy. And this is included because depending on what type of AI you're implementing, you might give them, varying levels of autonomy, whether you want them to have full control or just restricted within a certain domain. And AI ethics is basically the design and implementation of human-centric AI. So first you have AI, then you got to make sure that it doesn't turn into the Terminator. So you have to make sure that it's human-centric, and this means that they can coexist with humans, and humans also have a way to basically review the process of how the AI was made and make sure that it's ethical and safe. Moving on. Just now, I mentioned a third wave of AI ethics in the aim of the paper. So let's look at what the waves are. The first wave of AI ethics refers to ethical frameworks for the development of socially beneficial or human-centered AI and its deployment. This means that in the first wave of the topic of AI ethics, researchers and people who are in this field created a framework, an ethical framework to make sure that all AIs adhere to this guideline, this framework/guideline. That is the first wave, just creating this framework for everyone to adhere to. Then the second wave are efforts to assess the potential normative consensus and convergence of these frameworks. So while the first wave created these frameworks, the second wave shows how you implement and integrate the frameworks into actual real-life AI development. And the third wave, we have 4 points there. There are turning AI principles into actionable data science practice and governance, applicability of AI ethics in real-world cases, highlights issues of standardization in specific sectors, and questions of enforcement and regulatory control to AI governance. So first wave, create a framework. Second wave, integrating that framework into real-life AI development. Third wave is an analysis of that integration and making sure that people can follow along and there are ways to fix it if it's inconcurrent with what the actual development is. So context and background. Before we get to that slide, just as a reiteration, the paper basically takes the framework, so it's a theoretical framework, and then compare that to actual real life study of how they implemented the framework and see if there's any disconnect between the theory and the practice. So context and background of the actual paper itself. So what is the AI framework that I've been talking about? Well, in this paper, they use this AI ethical framework. And this is the European Commission High-Level Expert Group, or HLEG, requirements for a trustworthy AI. And there are 7 different points here for the HLEG AI requirements. And there are human agency and oversight, technical robustness and safety, privacy and data governance, transparency, diversity, non-discrimination and fairness, societal and environmental well-being, and accountability. I'll go more into detail about what each one of these points are later, but just know that this is the ethical framework that we'll be working with in this paper. So the context of how this paper came to be is that nations and developers of AI have used the HLEG guidelines or framework that I just showed you as mere recommendations and not really following it as closely as they should. And the main reason for this is because of 2 things. So these are the problems that you see on the slide. The first one is that the developers and nations are unsure on how to implement these AI guidelines into the design and deployment of AI. And number 2, they're unsure about whose responsibility it is when it comes to AI ethics. So first problem, they don't know how to implement it properly. And second one, they don't know who's supposed to be accountable. And the case study that they used in the research is an AI system that is developed by the Dutch government called Siri. I'm not really sure how to pronounce the full form of what Siri is because it is in Dutch. But basically, this AI ranks its citizens based on how likely they are to commit fraud. Quite a morbid example to use for a research paper, but we'll go along with it. And yeah, so that's the context and background. Moving on to methodology of how the research was conducted. So there are 3 main steps. The first one is to define the AI HLEG requirements that I showed you before with the 7 points, and an AI lifecycle, which we'll get into in a bit. Then what they did was they mapped each one of the requirements of the HLEG framework to the AI lifecycle using a code that they explain more in depth in the paper. I'm not going to go too much into that because it's very lengthy and technical. If you guys want, you can look at the paper and they have it in the appendix 1 at the end of the paper. So now that they have cross-referenced HLEG and the AI lifecycle, they created scores for each intersection of those 2 things. And depending, the higher the score, the better the performance is between adhering to the actual guidelines. So this is the table that the researchers are trying to fill. As you can see, actually, does anyone want to point out anything familiar that we've talked about in this table? Any words that you guys have seen before over the previous few slides? Christine.
Governance structure.
Yeah.
That the in AI HLEG, those are HLEG, is it framework?
Yeah, framework or guidelines, requirements, whichever is easier to pronounce or say. But yes, exactly. So on the left side here in this column, we have the AI HLEG requirements. So human agency and oversight row all the way down to accountability are the 7 requirements that we looked at before. And we are cross-checking this with that AI lifecycle stage going that way. So from business use case development, design, and going to the right all the way to outside of AI lifecycle. So everything blank in this are the things that we're trying to fill. Yes?
I don't know if you're going to explain this later, but how do they score?
It's a really good question, and I'll go into detail later. But yeah, this is a table that we're trying to fill. Now, going back to the requirements, I'll go more in depth with each point, or most of them. Human agency and oversight. Why is this important when you're creating a trustworthy AI? Well, think about this. And any AI that is being developed are being modeled by humans, and humans, unfortunately, we have biases. So just to mitigate and minimize the amount of bias that we can have, we need human agency and oversight from our peers or other people to make sure that they keep us in check and to not create a biased model within the AI. Because if the developer is biased, then the AI is most likely to be biased as well. So having a diverse group of people and making sure they're all keeping each other accountable is a good way to ensure that the AI itself isn't biased. Number two is technical robustness and safety. This basically points out to the fact that the AI itself has to be robust and not easily hacked into. This is just really technical safety concerns. Then privacy and data governance. Also, the AI has to create AI, you need a bunch of data, and just ethically, you need to make sure that the data has come from a proper source and that data isn't shared with anyone else. So it's only used for that AI and not just out there in the public if the users don't know that their data is being used. Transparency, again, any process development with the AI must be transparent so that anyone reviewing the development of this AI would know exactly how the AI was being developed. Then number 5, diversity, non-discrimination, and fairness. Again, relating back to the first point, just having a diverse group of developers reduces the chance for bias in the AI, so that doesn't propagate when it's actually being released to the industry. 6 also relates to number 5, society and environmental well-being, just to make sure that ethically when creating the AI, we don't kill the planet. And number 7, accountability, just making sure who is responsible if the AI goes haywire and start, taking over the world like Skynet. So that is the 7 requirements for a trustworthy AI. And then that will be cross-checked with the AI lifecycle, which is shown in the table above. So those 8 different, so there's business, development, design, training, building, testing, deployment, monitoring, and outside of the lifecycle. These are stages in the AI lifecycle that we will be monitoring throughout the study. And as you can tell, like design is basically before the AI was even developed, you need to design it first. And let's keep that down first. I'll explain more in the next slide. And the table below is talking about these 3 things here: technical, process, and business explainability. And these 3 things are what is being used to create the score, like you asked just now, of how the cross-check between AI lifecycle and the age-like requirements are done. So this is the filled out table from the table previously that I showed you. And as you can see, some areas are scored higher than other areas. You have a heat map displayed by the researchers as well, where the more red it is, the higher their score, and 0 means that they didn't score anything in that area. So based on this table, can anyone tell me any inference they want to make from it? Christine.
Mean that in that specific stage, they focus a lot more on that specific thing.
Yeah.
They want like a pretty evenly spaced heat map because you want all areas of the life cycle to focus on those different areas.
Yeah, perfect. That's good way of putting it. So what Christine said was, as you can see, the darker the area, the higher the number, means that in that specific stage, so for example, number 7 there, in the deployment stage, the process of technical robustness and safety is what is being focused on more than just being focused on more. And what we aim to do is to have a heat map where everything is that high. So trying to get rid of all the zeros and try to fill in the table with as much 6 and 7s as possible. Yes, John.
They aren't very transparent.
They aren't very transparent. Yeah. Yeah, as you can see in the transparency requirement, there are 4 zeros in a row throughout the design, training, building, and testing stage. And do you wanna guess what that indicates?
Something like Facebook, they don't tell you that they're taking your data, or they don't even tell you how the AI works and how much information you take.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. So the example given was like Facebook using your data without actually informing the users that the data is being used. So in the design stage of making that AI, that algorithm, the training, building, testing stage, no transparency was given. So that's a good example, but do keep in mind that this heat map is only pertaining to that Dutch government AI that tracks citizens based on how likely they are to commit fraud. So that is what the study, the whole research study is about, just that specific example of AI. Yes, Parsa.
I'm also surprised how there's such a high focus on testing and deployment for the technical robustness of the stage. When I just look at it, I wouldn't expect it to be this much. Maybe like some privacy and data governance elements. Just bit surprised with the numbers, like how they can make numbers.
Yeah. So that's the third person who mentioned about how the numbers came out. So John, Chrissy, and Parsa, you guys all had the same thought as me when I created this presentation and read the papers. That how did they come up with the numbers? Because it was never specified. So let me just inform you guys. The numbers are done by check. So in the appendix at the end of the paper, for each age-like requirement, they have testing of specific sub-requirements for each thing, each point. And what they did was from the Siri AI, they check how many of those sub-requirements are checked off. And for example, human agency has 5 different requirements. And for each stage, they check how many of those requirements are checked off. And depending on that, they'll put the number on screen. So for example, in design, only 2 of those 5 requirements are checked off. And in deployment, all 5 are checked off. So they're not constant, like how many sub-requirements they are. So the table can be quite confusing to read. It's not very intuitive. In my personal opinion, maybe percentages could have been a better way to indicate like how many sub-requirements were checked off. But this is what they gave us, and this is what we will work with for the for the paper.
I have a question.
Yes.
Talk about the AI lifecycle stages. What exactly is that AI lifecycle? What is it talking about?
Okay, yeah, good question. An AI lifecycle is basically talking about how AI is developed and implemented from the moment of the conception of the idea of making it to the actual releasing into the public. So as you can see, I'll go from left to right. Business use case development is basically when someone comes up with an idea. Okay, let's make the system that checks out how likely our citizens are to commit fraud. So that's the business use case development stage. That's just the idea generation of it. And that is usually done by, you look at responsibility up there, it's under the organization. So in this case, it would be the government of the Dutch government. Then it will be passed on to the team. So this is the development team that actually developed the AI. And this is broken down to 5 different stages: the design, training, building, testing, and deployment. So anyone who has has experience in software development, you would know that this is generally how the structure goes. You first design, then you train the data. That's more AI specific. Then you build it, you test it, and then once all that's complete, you deploy it into the market. And then after the deployment has been done, you monitor your AI and make sure, well, you monitor how it does, do any tweaks to it if you need to, so it goes back. But just in general, once you deploy it, you can monitor it. And then once all of that is done, it's just released in public. That is the outside of the AI lifecycle. So that's a very chronological, timeline-wise order of how to read this table. And that's the horizontal part, and the vertical is just the 7 requirements of H-like. Yes?
Quick question, the score is out of 10?
No, the score is not out of 10. It's out of how many sub-requirements there are for each H-like requirement. Yeah, it's not an intuitive scorekeeping technique, but like I said, percentages would have been a better indicator and easier to read. But yeah, any other questions about the table? No? Cool. Everyone brought good points. And yeah, so let's look at the results of what the table actually meant. You guys have already kind of touched upon which areas they're lacking in, which areas they're doing okay-ish. And but yeah, let's look at what the authors have found in this in the results. So there are 3 different sections of the result. There's practical findings, conceptual findings, and normative and political findings. I'll go through each of them one by one, and then just kind of wrap them up in their each sector, just to track the point home for each one. So first one is practical findings and their implications. So first one is, you can see that there's a lack of ethical requirements in the design phase. As you see, there's a bunch of zeros if you look at the table in the design phase. And this is because there are a lack of resources for meeting ethical requirements during that design phase. So what this indicates is that during designing the AI, they're kind of just winging it in terms of ethical requirements, and they just check this later during testing and deployment. And one might wonder why this is the case. Well, this is because the guidelines focus on accessibility, stakeholder participation, security, and a few others. And we can dive down even more. So in manager's side of things, there's no tangible method of applying AI ethics on a practical level. Because AI development requires non-tangible results such as interdepartmental or coordination, organizational change capacity, and risk tendency. So what these non-tangible things are is basically showing that just to develop the AI, the lack of transparency, the lack of coordination in the team and the industry is hindering the part of them to like meet the H-like requirements as they should. So it's like, for example, a human agency and oversight, transparency, accountability, they all get kind of mushed up if they don't have these non-tangible results. And for developers, implementing and validating adherence to the guidelines is difficult. So just taking what the H-like requirements once and putting it into practice is really hard, because there's a disconnect in how feasible that process is. And these are because of methodological issues. The first one is ethical requirements are not in alignment with AI development practices, and there are no standards for validation of ethics in software. So going through those 2 problems there in the next slide. The first one indicates that desirable structural translation method needs to be introduced. This basically means that the H-like framework doesn't have proper realistic ways of implementing ethical AI in the real world. And this is mainly because the H-like requirement specifically has more data science practices structure. While creating AI, we need more of a software engineering approach or a requirements engineering approach of making sure that the ethical requirements are met. And problem number 2 is that it comes with translation, formulation, and validation. The software engineering community needs to help the data science community and the AI community to have operationalization of values in software, tractability of ethics in software, and fairness in software. So I know there was a lot of terminology that I kind of just threw at you, but does anyone have any specific questions on what that was all about? Chrissy.
Just thinking it had this is different
From the other two? Yeah, that's a good point. I'll give a brief overview of all three. So practical findings basically goes into how feasible it is from translating the H-leg framework into practical practices of AI development, and showing that from this study, there's a disconnect between putting theory into practice. And this is done through the study of the managers that are involved and the developers that are involved in the in AI development. So that's practical. Just think of it like, practically speaking, this is hard to do. Then conceptual findings goes into depth with how the actual concept of the H-leg requirements are flawed in terms of creating a trustworthy human-centric AI. So instead of that translation part into practice, this is just the requirements itself doesn't pertain and doesn't advocate for the human-centric AI that that's more realistic and what we want. And the normative and political findings explore the part where AI right now are basically placed as a burden on the developers themselves. So the developers have to take accountability, have to create the AI, making sure everything goes right. Well, in reality, it's not just the developers that are concerned with AI development. We need the managers, the users, the stakeholders, all to play a role into making sure that we create an ethical, human-centric AI. So those are the three different sections. The one that I went through was the practical findings, which is that translation between theory and practice. Yeah. Yeah.
So it says the software engineering community needs to step up. Why are they talking about the software engineers? Is it because they have previously done such a thing where they kind of develop Scrum practices from Agile, which is a set of values, and similarly here, each leg is a set of values, and we need a kind of implementation sort of method here.
Yeah.
Is that the reason? How does operationalization fit in?
So great question. What operationalization does in this case, and what they're trying to talk about here, is that currently the H-leg requirements have a more data science approach of creating it. So it's more just data model AI implementation and just do that, get the job done. While in software engineering, the practice is more, like you said, Scrum or Agile practices, and that has a system, for those who are familiar, is just like you create it, and then if anything goes wrong, you tweak it, and then it's just process of adapting to that from the human side, not the AI side. So if you find anything wrong, you tweak your AI to make sure that it works. So that's the software engineering part. And just translate, we need to use the software engineering philosophy and theory through AI implementation to get rid of that disconnect that we currently have. Yeah. So yeah, like we just discussed, that is one option, and this is done with the Design for Values community. So Design for Values is, just think of it as a methodological design approach that aims at making human values a part of technological design, research, and development. So DFV is basically a different set of framework ideology to make sure that there's no disconnect between theory and practice. So as opposed to the current H-leg requirements. So AI systems should embed human values through a value hierarchy, a hierarchy structure of values, norms, and design requirements. I won't go too much into detail about what the value hierarchy is. This is another whole research paper that you guys can read about if you want, and just ask me and I'll give you a link for it. But what it does is basically solves the problem of that translation between theory and practice. So in a nutshell, that was all a bit too much. This is what it's all about. The problem with practical findings is that translation and operationalization is essentially bad. So the theory and the practice, there's a disconnect there. It's not a good thing. And the way to solve it is through design for value approaches or software engineering approaches where it's more adaptable and more human-centric to ensure that we have an ethical AI. So that was the practical findings. Now moving on to conceptual. As a reminder, conceptual is talking about the age-like framework itself and its drawbacks of creating a human-centric AI. So we can see from the table few slides back is that it lacks engagement in business and design stages in the first stages, as we talked about, and focuses more on deployment and monitoring. So like we have mentioned, during the design phase, they don't really pay attention about ethics and how ethical the AI is. But once it has been created, that's when, okay, maybe we should have done this, maybe we shouldn't have done this. So we need a prevention approach. So think about the ethics before implementing it, as opposed to implementing it, finding problems, then going like, maybe we shouldn't have done this. So the focus points are human agency, transparency, and accountability. This just goes through the age-like requirements as mentioned before. And like I just said, the framework has an interventionist approach, not a human-centric approach. And what this means is that interventionist means that you encounter a problem and then you fix it, as opposed to preventing the problem from happening in the first place. So the solution to this is through governance level by this guy called Schneiderman and his structures model of human-centered AI. And his theory is that to use AI with a focus on measuring human performance and satisfaction, valuing customer and consumer needs, and ensuring meaningful human control. So instead of the age-like requirements of having an interventionist approach, Schneiderman's suggestion is to have something that is more focused on the end users, the consumers themselves, to make sure that the AI doesn't have any problem from the get-go during the design phase. Again, problem is that the age-like requirements isn't human-centric, and the solution is Schneiderman's model, which is also a whole other research paper that you guys can read into if you guys want in your own time. Then finally, normative and political findings. This talks about how AI development isn't just for the developers, but the managers, the stakeholders, the users, and all these other different parties that are involved in ensuring that we develop a human-centric ethical AI. So these are the parties that are involved when creating an AI, at least what we want to be. So that's the team, the developers, the AI itself, the internal stakeholders, the organization, just get rid of that AL there, and the industry itself. So these are the 5 parties that are concerned with when creating an ethical AI. And right now, all the burden is on the team. What we want to try to do is distribute that burden to all parties to make sure that it's more human-centered approach, so anyone can know what the process is and not just the team that's building it. And also it takes just pressure off of the team to create a perfect AI. So yeah, the problem is accountability is only focused on the later part of the AI life cycle. Ethical AI debate is placed exclusively on data scientists and not on the business developers. And this is what I talked about. The debate and the burden is only on the team and not everyone involved. And the fact that the age-like requirements have a failure to acknowledge that standards, regulations, and agents are embedded within the AI lifecycle creates an idealized process. So what this means is that by refusing to acknowledge that everyone should be involved, we create an idealized concept that, okay, only the developers need to do it, which is not realistic in practice. And it's also from the H-Lake framework, it's hard to determine who's accountable because they want to blame everyone if the AI goes bad, but currently it's only focused on the team. So we have two options of tackling the accountability problem. The first one, if it's self-regulation of the market. So you release the AI and then everyone in the market have the opportunity to be like, okay, this AI is bad, it's not ethical, we need to fix this. And that's a nice idea to have, like a decentralization of practice where everyone can get involved. But the problem is it needs widespread voluntary adoption. It's really not feasible to expect everyone to get involved with each AI that are made. So that's option one, and it's not very feasible. So we go to option two, which is enforcing such regulation needs. Enforcing such regulation needs competent auditing institutions. And this basically means that before deploying it, people would have auditing institutions would check the AI, making sure that ethical frameworks are being followed. But the problem with this is that it's really hard to enforce these things right now because all the burden is placed on the team and not the wider business and everyone else that are involved. So the solution to this is operationalization that has an applicable and effective governance framework. And the way to do this is take into account the design process, organizational reality, industry development, evaluation of business goals, risk for the company, end users, and implicated actors of developing AI-based services. What this means is that instead of using the H-Lake performance right now that places the burden on the team itself, what we do instead is just focusing on these things that in the end, hopefully kind of spreads the burden and the accountability to everyone else. But yeah, so the problem is hard to determine accountability. Solution is to create a model that focuses on other parties as well. So yeah, that's the whole paper. In conclusion, I'll just run through the thing just to refresh what we've talked about. So the context is that nations don't follow the H-Lake guidelines. Instead, they use them as recommendations. And the problem with this is that they're unsure how to implement the AI guidelines into their design and practice. So that's the disconnect between theory and practice. And they're also not sure on who's accountable, as we've talked about just recently. Then the researchers, what they did was they define H-Lake and the AI lifecycle, map it, and create scores, as we can see from the table that we've talked about for quite a while. And then the findings, we have three. First one is practical findings. We found that there's problem in translation and operationalization. And the solution to that is to have a design for value approach. Conceptual findings, we realized that there's a problem that the framework itself isn't human-centric. And the potential solution to that is to use Snyderman's model, which is more human-centric. And then normative findings, we realized that it's hard to determine who's accountable. And the way to tackle that is to create a model that focuses on other parties as well. So yeah, that's the whole paper and what they talked about. Now we're going to move on to critiques of the paper itself and the idea of how they arrived and just conducting the methodology and stuff. So does anyone have a critique of the paper? John?
Very small.
Yep, perfect. Sample size is really small. They only used one case study, the Dutch government AI, and also only one AI framework to look at. So it's only 1 and 1. It's hard to use that as a way to like adopt to the entire using that and then making a implication saying that it's throughout the entire market. Parsa?
Maybe too many concepts there.
Many models, yeah, agreed. The terminology is quite convoluted. Also, you guys have mentioned that in the table itself, the numbers are not intuitive. But yeah, here are some of the problems the main problems that I pointed out is that it only uses one case study, like John said, it only uses one guideline. The table lacks intuitive reading with the numbers. Also, they never expanded properly on the solution section. There's only one paragraph each if you read the paper. And like Parsa said, convoluted language as well. But yeah, here are the references. Here's the paper. And thank you guys.
Thank you very much, Naki, for that amazing presentation. We're now to the end of the paper reading group, and I hope everyone got value out of this. I thank you all for coming to DS3's first paper reading group. I hope you show up to the next as well. To keep updated on this, check out our GitHub, check out our Discord. If you need the links, they're here, and we'll see you soon.
Oh, man,